So apparently speedrunning's the thing, so here we go. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Where I take space related stories from around the internet and read them out for your enjoyment. All the relevant links are down below, and please don't forget to do the usual YouTube gump, because if you don't, the nanoswarms will steal your other sock. But more importantly, as always, I hope that you enjoy. Blammo! Personal best. I just want to give a quick thanks to the Tier 5 channel members and patrons. Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Sergeant Puma, Cat Crab Lobster, and Duck Machine. Thank you very much for the support. It is much appreciated. Growing Old, Where the Skilled Die Young. Written by LordsOfJoop. The instructor, on a floor, stood with his jaw angled up and eyes scanning the classroom and practice space aboard the vessel adjacent Premium. The AP was a vessel purpose-built for cultural exchange, learning, and above all else, the brokering of the rarest of elements throughout the Dominion. Peace. To that end, it had instructors from the top of the tiers for their respective sciences, and one class was in demand, and a required course, demanding a full focus of even the most jaded of veterans, conflict resolution and crisis management. Despite a florid name, it seemed centered on brutalizing an opponent in a physical environment, recovering enough from wounds accrued during instruction, and repeating the process as often as the student could actively survive. The rate of pass to fail stood at a single highest imbalanced ratio in the entirety of the floating academy, a benchmark which seemed a source of either pride or shame for the instructors. The Oneshots, prior to their departure, described the harrowing moments to their peers as grueling yet terrifying lessons, sometimes with horror stories enough attached to dissuade future enrollees from continuing their education aboard the adjacent Premium. Despite no student being required to pass his course, few students would drop it before their stamina and mental endurance broke them. It was a point of honor to continue as long as was feasible and survivable. As he looked at the remaining 31 students still in their tired desks, Honnock Floor began his daily lecture, a routine which was punctuated by the cruelties which inevitably ensued. Wrong answers seemed to be the minimum, with some answers being wronger than others. "Peace is painful," he said, as always. "Peace is expensive. Peace is the buffer between wars, and peace is achievable. Tell me how to make that happen." As he crossed his arms, he glared from face to face, missing no one, skewering none more than their neighbor. The ritualized demand would be an empty space, filled soon enough with a mistake, and the real lesson would begin. Always a surprise, never a dull moment, being fair. One student, Agro from the wintry hellhole, a death wielder who'd rarely spoken, raised her uppermost limb and smoothed the fur from her eyes, and I locked the instructor. We listen before we speak, and the air in the classroom seemed to shift. What would usually happen singularly failed to do so. The monstrous instructor aides did not enter the room to pair off with the students and begin thoroughly beating them senseless. Instead, the instructor spoke further, a rarity. "And from that student Aspergillna," the student so named stood up, now fully addressed in specific, and continued, her voice high, strident, though not eager nor fearful. Death wielders rarely carried fear in their voices, a unifying trait, really. They had to face far worse threats simply surviving their childhoods than the AP could produce. Some, they seemed to relax, even during the lessons, regardless of the brutality involved. "We honor those who have fallen and become the better student. We are never an enemy on purpose." This seemed to be the correct reply, until the instructor motioned for the outside portal, from which came not a horde of grunting nightmares, but a single, unarmed human, aged somewhere in the range of 7 decades, looking to be careworn more than weathered by the storms of warfare. So many humans in that class served as instructor aides as to familiarize every student with their own personalized beatings. The mere sight of the old man settled concerns immediately. "Class, that might be the most accurate and most heartfelt answer that you've literally bared witness to. So I suggest that you memorize it, as it would be considered crucial." The newcomer, soon to be standing shoulder to shoulder with the much taller instructor, seemed to gaze at nothing and no one, simply shuffling from point to point. A slow progression of foot following foot, padded by thick, warm socks. The cool, hard tiling of the vessel's floor was unforgiving to warm-blooded species, so the thermal garments for the feet were far from uncommon. "This is Mr. Yi, who has a small reward for anyone who can perform what I call a major miracle." And with that cue, the so-named Mr. Yi opened up his right hand and produced a simple, basic coin, one from any of almost 300 settled worlds. The value, give or take, of a can of pressurized liquid stimulant, or a cooling beverage for a warm climate. Insignificant pocket change. And it might as well have been a system lord's ransom, as every eye bent to see it. "Take the coin from his custody and you'll exit this room a full graduate. I'll even offer commendations to your respective career guides in your name." Reportedly, he'd done so in the last 6 cases since his installation aboard the AP, and none could say who nor why. That moment seemed to be it. And that was a challenge enough for the first student and the uppermost tier to rise, step to the floor, and approached Mr. Yi. "I need that coin." The student, Agro, looked like an earthborn grizzly bear by the way of a scorpion, possessed chitinous armor, which bore cracks and folds never intended, wounds accrued during the painful reckoning dressed as daily lessons. He'd been a sociologist by trade before joining the Fleet's Academy and awarded a slot in the class, and seemed right enough. "Then take it." The old man didn't seem to speak, yet the words were soft, carried on the non-existent breeze, and the student moved to close the distance. A moment later, the student was on the floor, the coin still visible, and the old man had done something brief, painful, and exerted pressure enough to move 200-kilo entity almost 3 meters towards the door. "Next." And so began another beating. Student after student filed away from the tiered seating, and all experienced a brief, harsh lesson. The coin was Mr. Yi's property, and they could not even touch him, let alone take the coin. No pleading or inquiry was considered valid, no threat even acknowledged, and no attack succeeded. Even the paltry defenses of the most advanced students fell apart when the old man simply avoided all threats and answered with overwhelming superiority. If what they knew before was a mere cruelty, what they experienced now was a savagery, and by someone who offered no words of condemnation or contempt, rather a never-ending look of vague disappointment. Every student who fell was escorted away by the still-standing students, until the last sparrer remained, and it was Horneck Floor who escorted him away. No words of warning nor solace provided. Such was his class. Until, at long last, the student Aspergillner was all who remained present and remained standing, still waiting patiently, and she walked from the tier that she'd been sitting in and approached the human, and performed a miracle. She sat on the floor in front of him, legs folded primly, and looked into his eyes, never breaking contact. "I wish to learn." And the coin fell to the floor, danced briefly, and like every student save her, fell into silent repose. "Tomorrow, then." And Mr. Yi gave a grave, serious nod to Horneck Floor, who then bowed deeply in a motion viewed as fearing defeat, or perhaps acknowledging a more severe threat, to which Mr. Yi replied with a bow just as deep. The old human turned on a heel, departing from the training room, somehow looking impressed. With a motion, Horneck Floor instructed Aspergillner to rise, which she said, "How did you know to do that?" To this she replied, "He was teaching us. I chose to learn, and you never taught us anything about fighting. I was always learning from you, never the ones who beat us down, over and over again." To this, Horneck Floor smiled. He never smiled in open dialogue with a student, to their knowledge. Not even a smirk nor a sneer. Always placid, always calm and detached. What have you learned from me? That conflict is painful and made worse when you fight learning from it, and that an old man is who taught you how to fight. She seemed satisfied enough with her answer to perform what her species did in lieu of a smile, then gave a courteous bow in acknowledgement of a teacher. As she moved to the door, her neck floor dressed her anew. It wasn't a fight, Aspergillner. It was a learn. And to this, she paused in her stride, and finally understood the lesson. To this day, she is the instructor of conflict resolution and crisis management, and every year, she is visited the day before her single graduate is released, and always by the same man, Harnick Floor, who honors his fallen, much-loved teacher with nothing more than a coin and a request. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.